Hello, this is the non-dual lectionary for the 11th Sunday after Pentecost, year A, and we're continuing with Matthew. We're actually picking up right where we left off last week, so let's get to it. A pretty famous story from Matthew, chapter 14, verses 22 to 33. Immediately he made the disciples get into a boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." So there's a surface level here, right, of Jesus does an amazing miracle thing, walking on the water. Um, nah. I think this is actually a really cool little allegorical story about, we might call it like maybe the interaction between, or maybe the emergence of the, like, of true nature out of the small self, something like that. And like just digging back in, like kind of starting first principles again, right? Like basically all of us from a very young age, right? We start to live out of this small self, this ego self, psychological self, false self, whatever people call it, so many different things, right? But the sense is like this constructed thing that we call I, right? And the the message of all the great spiritual teachers throughout history and worldwide is something like, through different practices or by looking closely enough, or sometimes just because there can emerge, right? Like the recognition and realization that that self is not our true identity and never was, right? Like it's as an identity and as a recognition, not as a new thing, a new discovery, and not as something that you make happen, right? But that small self is, full of attractions and distractions and fears, right? Like, I mean, some teachers will just say the whole thing is fear, right? And that true nature is something like, the infinite expressed here in the finite, right? I mean, we use the word non-dual. Saint Catherine of Genoa ran through the streets saying, yelling, "My deepest me is God." Something like that, right? Always with a pointer of like, you got to go see it for yourself, and don't believe a description, right? It's not a concept. Anyway, so we come back to this story here, and um, I think that, like, the unlocking key here is something like, again, like this is seemingly happening outside, right? But imagine it as an allegory of like our own experience, right? So something like the disciples are embodying just small self, right? And Jesus is embodying true nature. And Peter is like embodying like small self that gets a glimpse, and but then what's the story here, right? So they're out, they're battered by the wind, the wind was against them. I mean, just like, they're pushed and shoved around. Their small selves are, right? They want to go one way, the wind's pushing them another way. They're forces are beating them around. And the allegory here is, we could expand on that a lot, but the message just of like, right, the small self is always trying to navigate all these things that seem to be against it. And Jesus simply walks out, Why? Because true nature can always flows, right? True nature is just what is. So Jesus seems unaffected by any of this. And true nature and the small self, right? This true nature is always appears to the small self as as a death, as something terrifying, right? And I mean, you can dig into all sorts of teachers on this too, but some will tell you like there's the experience of like nothingness, right? The actual experience of like dying to self, die before you die, as Richard Rohr says, like that. I mean, it's just everywhere. So, what's the reaction of these small selves or the allegorical small self to true nature moving towards them? It's a ghost. They're terrified, right? But and what does true nature say? Always, don't be afraid, right? It fundamentally it isn't something to be afraid of because it's only going to destroy what isn't real anyway. And then what we have is Peter here, right? Saying like getting a glimpse, like wait, there's something here, right? Like, wait, I get it. I'm getting a sense of this, like I'll come do that too, right? And true nature says, of course, welcome. And it works, right? Like, I mean, by relaxing into it, by trusting, whatever you want to, surrendering, whatever you want to call it, it works. Peter starts walking. But when he notices the strong wind, right, and becomes frightened, and that's just a beautiful thing, right? He's not stabilized there, the recognition isn't like um hasn't fully emerged as his sort of core, felt sense of identity. And so when when his small self starts to get battered around and he becomes frightened, he contracts, he collapses, and and fear takes over, right? He begins to sink because he's no longer, in true nature flowing with what is, and screams out, Lord, save me. And of course, immediately, right, what happens? He is saved because he was never in any danger to begin with. It was only the small self's perception of it that was, right? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased because now true nature, even if unrecognized, right, by them, and they do recognize it, right? But even if unrecognized internally, right, as their true nature, um, when true nature is there, fear drops away, right? Um, fear in that sense is like ego or small self and fear like are one and the same. Um, so again, I think like just what a great little illustration allegory. If we've got ears to hear, we can hear because it's just pointing directly at like, hey, this is what is right now. Where are you in this story? I mean, I don't know. But it's an invitation, right, to recognize ourselves in the story and recognize what is always, and sort of what can be for, our sense of what is.